Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to another judging contest today. So today I want to dive in and look more at soil texture. So remember yesterday we went through some different aspects of soil texture, and I told you we'd followed up with an assignment today, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Anyway, which with that, we'll dive into what we need to do today. One FFA announcement today is the last day to shoot me an email if you want to go to the caliber grading contest with us next Friday. I'm putting that list together. I need to know who's going. So if you caliber graded in the fall, want to cattle grade in the spring, I need to know. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday. So what is soil texture? It's basically the size of the grains of soil. And you can see the specifics here. Sand is anywhere between 2 to 0.05 millimeters. We mentioned that sand is big enough that we can see each of those individual sand. That's why it's really gritty. Silt, somewhere in the middle. The actual definition is 0.05 to 0.02 millimeters. And then we have clay, which is really, really small, microscopically small. We mentioned sand is kind of like filling a trash can full of basketballs. Silt, more like full of golf balls. And then clay, more like BBs. Okay, so if we look at these right here, we have our gravel chunks. I just use that kind of for comparison right there. Okay, and we mentioned that, sand is very coarse. And then we have silt and clay. Okay, this was the paper that I gave you yesterday. You don't need it today. We're going to need it next week, so please hang on to that. We mentioned that we can handle that in our hands. So the first thing we do, right, is we put some water on it. We squeeze it in our hand. We make it into a ball. We open our hand. Does it hold together? Well, if it doesn't hold together, it's sand, right? Okay. Now, if it holds together, but it makes a really small ribbon, then we're going to look for something that's a little more probably silt. Okay. If we make a ribbon on our fingers and it gets really big, it holds together, really sticky, that's going to be clay. Okay. Now, what I want to get to is this right here. So the sub has passed out these papers. Okay. Just this paper at this point. And so you guys have this right here, and you'll notice there's a lot of words here. Okay. These are all different types of soil, and you notice they have a lot of words that are in common. For my second hour, we got to this yesterday. The other classes I didn't, but if you follow my mouse as it goes across here, we have clay, we have silt, we have sand, we have loam right here in the middle, which loam, remember, is generally equal parts sand, silt, and clay. But what about all these other ones right here, okay? Remember, basically the first word is what we learn in English as an adjective, and the last word is a noun, and so it's going to use to describe that. So if I bring my mouse over here on the left side, and we look at what we call sandy clay, what does that mean? It means that the soil is predominantly clay, but how would I describe that clay? Sandy. So it's basically clay that has a little bit of sand mixed in with it. If I go to the very middle here where it says clay loam, that means that we're going to have a loam soil that's a little on the heavier side when it comes to clay. Okay. And so remember, that means it's going to hold that water in a little bit tighter. We may have a little more runoff issues, stuff like that. If we go down here to the bottom left corner where it says loamy sand, you'll see that means basically that we're going to have something that's going to be 80% sand, but it is going to have a little bit of silt and clay in there as well. Okay, so what we're doing today is the easiest math you've ever done because it involves tracing. So all you need is a pencil. You don't actually have to do any legitimate math here. So I'm going to give you three numbers. I'm going to say we're going to have a certain percent clay, a certain percent silt, and a certain percent sand. And based on that, you are going to trace these across and come up with the answer of what specific kind of clay it is. So just a whole bunch of tracing today to get the right answer. So let's try one of these. So if you look in the top left-hand corner, you notice I have 30% clay, 30% sand, and 40% silt. In all of these scenarios, what do they need to add up to? Well, of course, they need to add up to 100, right? Okay, so they're going to add up to 100. So all I have to do is trace them across. You notice the first one is 30% clay. So I'm going to go on this left side where it says percent clay. Follow my mouse over here. Percent clay is over here on the left side. So I'm going to go right where it says 30. And if you follow my mouse, I'm essentially going to trace across to that line. I recommend today using a pencil, though I won't make you, because you're going to want to erase this between each time that you do it. So if I trace 30% clay, I now have a line that goes across where it says 30% clay. Now I have 30% sand. Which line do I use, Mr. Branscum? I go down here where it says percent sand. I know some of that's cut off. If you go down where it says percent sand, and I notice it goes two different directions, so I want to go to the one that goes towards the line. So I'm going to trace that one across, and as I follow that one across, it's going to go right here. It looks like it's going to be clay loam, but let's check just to be sure. Then I have 40% silt. So on this left or right side, I'm going to go to where it says 40, and I'm going to have this line right here, and I'm going to trace that across, okay? And you'll notice when I trace that across, it intersects right here in the middle where it's called clay loam. So what is it? It's a loam. It's a mixture of sand, silt, and clay, but it's pretty heavy on the clay, okay? Now, you have that paper in front of you, not your worksheet yet, and I'm going to have you work some of these out slowly as we go through, okay? So this is our next answer. So I want you to find 10% clay on your paper. We're going to do this nice and slow. 10% clay on your paper, and I want you to circle that 10. So if you follow my mouse on the left side of your paper where it says percent clay, go over there, circle that 10. And then go ahead and draw you a line across right here. Follow my mouse. So we're going to go where it says percent clay at 10, and then we're going to draw this line across. So everyone be doing it, even those of you napping in the back. Circle 10, go across. The next one we have is 50% sand. So I'm going to go down here where it's 50% sand. See where my mouse is? And I'm going to draw that one across. So there's my 10 for clay from earlier. Now I have my 50% for sand, and then I'm going to go to where it's silt at 40%, and I'm going to drag that line down, and you notice it mixes right there in the loam. So it's a mixture of sand, silt, and clay. Yes, it's a little heavier on the sand side, but it's still enough for soil scientists to call this loam. So it has a mixture of them. Okay, threw you a curveball in this one. You look at the problem in the left-hand corner, and it says 70% clay, 10% sand. So what is my percent silt? Well, I'm going to have to add that up, and we know it should equal 100. So 70 for clay and 10%, if I add those together, I get 80%. So what's left? Well, silt needs to be 20%. Hopefully you can figure that out, okay? So I go over here where it says clay. I'm going to circle my 70% way up here, okay, right? So my clay's at 70%. I'm going to circle, whoa, that is way off. What did I do there? Oh, Mr. Branscum. I'm going to undo this. Here we go. So let's move that one. Oh, just kidding. I did these in the wrong order. Okay. So if I do that again, I started with sand this time. Sorry. So if you go down here where it says 10 on sand, you'll notice I did that one straight across. Then I did the 70% clay. Okay. What happens if I'd picked the different line? Well, if none of them ever intersect, I know I'll use the wrong line and I'd go back and do it again. Now I know I need 20% silt. So I'll go where it's silt, and it will intersect right here where my mouse is, so we know this is clay. And obviously, by being 70% clay, you could probably guess that it was going to be a pretty heavy clay soil. Okay, last one I have for you on this practice one. We have 20% clay. We have 60% sand. So what is my percent silt in this problem? So 20 plus 60 is 80. So we know that the remaining is 20% silt. Okay, so I'm going to start this over here. That I went ahead and did. It looks like I'm just maybe a little bit off today. Oh, Mr. Branscum, losing his mind. Okay, so if I do this one, I'm going to go ahead and drag and fix it as I go. This time what did I do? Okay, let me try doing this right. So I do have 20 clay, 60 sand. So let me drag that over. And I know that my other 20 is 20% silt. So when I put that together, we can all make mistakes, right? 20% or that 60% sand. I have my 20%. It's going to be clay. And then I have my 20% silt, and that's going to intersect at what we call sandy clay loam. So it's a loam that's a little heavier on the sandy and clay side, not so heavy on the silt side, right? So in just a second, our substitute's going to pass out the worksheet, and you're going to have this right here. You also already have the paper that has it. So you have two triangles if you want to use them. But if you look at this, essentially what it's going to ask you to do is trace these out and find it. And it's going to give you two of these. So it gives you the answer to A, but B says, and you can't see it really well, 60% clay, 30% sand. Well, that'd leave me 10% silt. So I'd trace it out, and then I would write the name of it right there. If they're missing a number, okay, if they're missing a number, then it's your job to figure the answer to these. There's a front and there's a back for you to work out. These very bottom ones here, if you get those done, great. If you don't, they might be bonus points. I haven't really decided with these bottom ones, but do your best on these. All of these rest above, though I will count right or wrong. So, but basically, you're just going to trace across, and you're going to tell me what kind of soil it is. This paper right here is due at the end of the hour. So that's all we have due today. Get that done, and I will see you guys later. Don't forget, we are now 4 days away from your agri-science fair presentation. So just a daily reminder for that. Have a fantastic day, guys.